All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. We are making our way through February. Another week is almost behind us. February is one of our favorite months because we always spend that month featuring incredible women in science, exploration, adventure, and conservation from all over the world. If you visit exploringbytheseat.com, you can find a ton of live events still coming up over the next few weeks. And then March will be jam-packed, April, so on and so forth. We've always got a lot of live content happening here at Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. Now, our next speaker is joining us from the future. She's joining us from Australia, one of my favorite places on the planet. Let's give her a little intro before we bring her in. We've got Dr. Vanessa Pirotta joining us today. She's a wildlife scientist, a woman in STEM and STEAM, a science communicator, author, and vessel operator. So her research uses innovative technologies for wildlife conservation. She's also the lead scientist of the scientific and citizen science program Wild Sydney Harbour, which has one of the coolest logos I've ever seen. And so she's learning more about marine life in Sydney Harbour, Australia. She's also an author. So children's books, including The Voyage of Whale and Calf, as well as Oceans at Night, as well as the book Humpback Highway. So diving into the mystery or the mysterious world of whales. So let's get Vanessa in with us right now.
Hello.
Hey, Vanessa, how are you?
Well, thank you. Yes, I'm coming to you from the future here in Australia.
All right, so cool. It is so great to have you live with us. We have a great group of classrooms with us today. More are going to tune into the recording afterwards. I can see classes saying hi in the chat already. So if you are tuning in via YouTube, don't be shy. Say hi in the chat and start putting your questions in whenever you're ready. And we've got a group or two hanging out backstage. We'll bring them in when the time comes as well. But yeah, we want to hang out with you. We want to dive into your world for a little bit before we get into that Q&A action.
Oh, well, this is so exciting. Thank you so much for having me. I love this because a lot of what I do as a scientist is in Australia. So we don't have the opportunity to travel around the world and share this knowledge. So thank you so much, Joe, for providing this platform. And I am so excited to hear from all of you who are watching here today, and then also those later on, because learning is one of the things I love doing. So before I tell you about a very special whale, I'm going to introduce you to my friend. Okay. His name is Winston, and he is a humpback whale. In fact, he is an East Coast Australian humpback whale. Now, whales are like you and I. They breathe air like this. They go, and they suck up the air, and then they can dive underwater, especially Winston. He can hold his breath for 20 minutes or so. Now, every year, Winston does something really, really, really cool. He goes from one part of Australia where he goes to a whale disco to breed and have babies. And then when it becomes summertime, he switches directions and he migrates down to Antarctica. And that's where he is right now. And this is very important to understand that this particular type of whale, the humpback whale, they either are migrating, feeding, or breeding. And so when they need to feed, they'll go down to Antarctica and feed, and sometimes in Australian waters. And when they need to breed, they'll go to another place. The whale I'm about to introduce you to very shortly doesn't really do that. In fact, we believe that they do everything they need to do in the nice tropical waters, and they're referred to as a tropical baleen whale. What's baleen? Baleen whales are whales that have no teeth, just like Winston. Instead, they have long hair like strands, like my hair, hanging out around their mouth. If you've ever seen Finding Nemo, you would have seen Marlin, Dory's dad, and Nemo's dad. I can hear you all going, no, you got that wrong, Vanessa. Marlin, which is Nemo's dad, and then Dory are in the mouth of a humpback whale. And their baleen plates are very rough. It's kind of like a broom. And then their tongue, it will lift up to the top of their mouth and it'll expel the water if they engulf something. And while we're on feeding, and I will get to my slides, these are throat pleats. This is designed, they open the mouth up really wide, and then they'll expand their throat pleats like a slinky, or if you're an older generation, an accordion. And the idea is to engulf both prey and water and then to get rid of the water on the side. And I'm sure many of you heard about the whale the other day swallowing a human. Incorrect. A whale, like a humpback whale, physically cannot swallow a human because their esophagus, where our food goes down, is really small. So I'm going to present to you some of this information that I've just spoken about. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go present, share screen, and here we go. I'm going to show you some images to support what I've just been speaking about. This here is a humpback whale, and this is the animal that we usually see in Australian waters. So in Australian waters, we have a variety of species, and this is really cool because, well, the more we know about the ocean, we can learn a lot through whales, and whales like Winston here are really helpful. And so you can kind of see that they've got these bumpy things on their mouth. That is their tubercles. And so they've got little hair on them. We don't exactly understand why they have those, but it's most likely a sensory thing. Now, as I said before, these whales will go from one place to another. So one place generally to feed and another place generally to breed. And so I've got some examples of whales. And in fact, this one here on the right-hand side in the shallow waters, that's in Madagascar. And then you've got a whale here near a big iceberg that's in Antarctica. So you can see that these whales do different things. And in fact, I thought while we're here, one of the coolest things that my team and I have done is create drones to collect whale snot, which is essentially lung microbiota, which is really cool. And I just thought I'd throw this in here so you can see. Here comes the whale. The drone is flying over the whale and the petri dish lid opens. When it opens, it captures the boogers and then it shuts. And then voila, we have our sample. And that was taken off Sydney when the whales are migrating. So you understand I'm really talking about what these whales are doing at certain times of the year, which is very important to help me explain the whale that I'm going to introduce you to. And then at sometimes when the whales are heading back to Antarctica, we can see them feeding. And in Australian waters, a lot of them are congregating in these areas that we've never seen this many whales do this. And this is what we call kind of like a whale soup, in my opinion. But it's really very much a whale supergroup feeding event, which is where more than 20 whales are in a spot and more than all these whales are within 5 body lengths of each other. I'm just here to remind you that a whale, like a humpback whale, is the size of a bus. So if you can picture all your school buses at your school and then pile them up in 20 or so, and then you've got them all in one area, we're talking about a big area here. But the whale that I want to talk to you today about is the Brutus whale, also pronounced brides. So if you think of Winston, Winston had a very pointed, a very rounded mouth, whereas the Brutus whale is a whale that has a very pointy mouth. Now, these whales behave a little bit differently to that of Winston, and that's okay because different animals do different things. Different humans do different things, and that's completely fine as well. So this whale, we don't see often. We see them in our waters at times when we least expect. And as a scientist, one of the things that I want to do with my science hat is to help learn more about creatures to be able to protect them. So that's very important, a really important note. So for the Brutus whale, they are appearing to be in our waters potentially year-round. The Brutus whale, also looks like it's spelled brides, is an animal that may be non-migratory, which means unlike Winston, they may not go to one place and another. They may remain in the certain areas where they can feed, breed, and do what they have to do. So in this case, these species might be hanging out in our waters year-round potentially without us even knowing. In fact, very, very, very excitingly, we had observations of three observations of this whale just a few weeks ago. And so that's really exciting because it shows us during the summertime here in Australia, which might be your winter time right now, which is very cold, but for us, it's really hot. These animals are occurring in our waters, which is really interesting. Now, my team and I, because we're not able to be out on the water the whole time, one of the best ways that we're helping document these creatures is by using social media. That's right. If you're really little, social media can sometimes be a bit, you want to stay off it. But if you're an adult and you have your time that you set where you're going to go on it to have a look, that's exactly what we did. And so we went on and we looked if people shared images of whales and they didn't necessarily know what it was. And we were able to go, did you know you've seen a Brutus whale? So my team and I collated all this information, observations of whales, Brutus whale that is, in Australian waters. And one of the coolest things is we found that these animals are not only occurring on the East Coast at least and in other places, but they're doing interesting things that have not yet been documented anywhere around the world. And this is a friendly reminder that Brutus whales are found in other parts of the world, but we wanted to learn about them in Australian waters. So the coolest thing here is that we described different feeding behaviors. How cool is that? So not only do we document occurrence, which means where they turn up and where they are, that's great, but we also documented that they're doing different feeding in different places. So different feeding behaviors rather, and utilizing their environment differently. So we group this into deep water feeding and shallow water feeding. Okay, so let's see what this looks like. And here we have, there's a bit of music, but it's not mine. Here we have 3 Brutus whales, dolphins, birds coming up and engulfing prey. And it's just like that big scoop that they do to eat. Okay, so that's in deeper waters. Now let's look at the shallow water surf feeding. We call this shallow water surf feeding. You can see this individual has its mouth open. That white stuff is the baleen plates. Remember, they have no teeth. And this animal is within less than 10 meters of water easily. And you can see it's literally riding the surf. There are other examples where the whales are riding the surf with surfers. Pretty cool. In fact, one surfer can be seen just looking at this giant whale as it goes past and targeting a prey. Let's have a look at that one more time. Here we go. You can see that prey patch around it, which is most likely fish. Opens its mouth, scoop, scoop, shut. And then it's probably trying to get rid of the water. Remember, they filter feed, and then a wave picks it up and it looks like it's surfing. But we have other really great examples of the animals are really right within the surf. So in other words, this whale is showing us that in order to feed and meet its energy requirements, this animal is targeting food in our waters. And it just happens to know that, hey, there's a shallow water here, but that's okay. This is where the food is, and I'm going to go there. And I'm probably very nimble as this type of whale. There are some cases where these animals have been feeding in shallow waters and they've become stranded, and it's not been very good. So these observations are just so brilliant, because as scientists, what we want to do is help inform our government to make sure that we go, okay, we now know that these animals occur here and they're doing these types of feeding behaviors. And then we share that with other scientists around the world. Pretty cool. And I thought, if you don't mind, Joe, I'm just going to share a little bit of information about the other research that I do here in Australia, because it's so cool to share this with you. This is the humpback whales like Winston. And one of the cool things that I'm able to do is work with our First Nation knowledge holders, the Gamay Rangers, Indigenous Australians. And we're learning more about the marine life like Brutus whales along what we call the Humpback Highway, which is that migratory corridor of Sydney, but also in places like Gamay, which is also known as Botany Bay. And here's a snap of the team, some of the team rather. We're learning more about the fur seals that occur in these places. It's kind of like, well, it's not like Pier 39 in San Francisco, but we're seeing more of these New Zealand and Australian fur seals, which are pretty cool. And I'll just point out, you'll see a logo there that says Wild Sydney Harbour, because right in Sydney Harbour, we have some pretty cool animals that we're learning about as well. And these are also some amazing images that show dolphins in Botany Bay and the fur seals. But this middle one here is an animal that you probably heard a lot about yesterday in the news, which is known as the false killer whale. And unfortunately, we had a whole pod of 157 strand in Tasmania yesterday. Unfortunately, we just don't know why they strand, but this here is an example of one of those beautiful creatures in our blue backyard, which is really interesting. And then finally, the dolphins of Sydney Harbour. This is a great shot because we are one of the busiest harbours on earth, yet we don't really know about the marine creatures in our blue backyard. And so one of the things I'm really trying to channel through Wild Sydney Harbour is the fact we have dolphins in the harbour and we are learning more about them. And one of the ways we're learning more about them is by using their dorsal fin, which can help us learn if this is Jack or Jenny or if that's Bob over there, because each of their dorsal fin is unique to each individual. And behind is a very iconic Sydney ferry. And this is a really funny image I just had to share with you. This is one of the first seals that is at the Opera House steps a few years back. He woke up one morning, and it's a he, and he put his bum off the side and he did a wee. That's right. Look at that. He is doing a wee. How clever he was to decide that he was going to put his little bum off the side there and do a wee. And I think his face says it all. He's woken up and very relaxed. So on that note, we come to the tail end of my talk. If you'd like to learn more, I'm sure Joe will share information. These are my books as well, which talks about the Humpback Highway. It does mention Brutus whales in there, but hopefully when I speak to you all next, we'll have way more information about them. Until then, the way I like to leave these things is to think about when a humpback whale like Winston jumps out of the water. We only see a small portion of their body, but there's so much that goes on below the ocean. So it's a snapshot in time and a sneak peek of what we can learn about. And that's why it's so exciting to be able to think about whales as this really important part of the ocean that feeds in one area, poos in another, helps the ecological services of the ocean do what it has to do to help provide clean air for us and the food that we eat. So we really need to say thank you to whales and to help learn about those that are doing important services for us, like that of the humpback and the Brutus whale. And on that note, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and come back to all of you. I hope you found that super duper interesting.
All right. Thank you so much, Vanessa. That was a great presentation. I absolutely, well, in the book, Humpback Highways, you get to read a lot about your research using the drones and trying to find the right technique, the right timing to be able to fly the drone in, get that sample, and then close that sample before it can be contaminated. So it's not as easy as it looks. There was quite a process to getting that sorted.
Absolutely. And that's what's so important to learn about, the process. So if you're a future scientist or whatever you're doing, you need to really be thinking about what's the question I want to ask and how do we do what we do now, but how can we make that better? So how can we access whales without having to hurt them or kill them? And so fortunately, a lot of research these days requires cool technology, but it's all about that thought process. And that's what's so amazing, Joe.
Absolutely. It's that just part of science. We sometimes shy away from making mistakes.
Yes.
But that's a huge part of science is you're testing theories and hypotheses. Mistakes are made, but you learn a lot from them and you come back again. So
absolutely. And you keep coming back because you can go, that worked. Oh, that did not work. So we go from something else. And that's how we're sitting here right now, watching us on the computer screens. All of these things, some things have gone wrong, but then they've made it better, right? So yes, you've got to keep trying. That's a key message there, isn't it, Joe?
Absolutely. Well, before we get into Q&A action, I can already see some questions coming in the chat. I would like to play a little Kahoot with our classrooms. I made a quick Kahoot quiz while you were presenting. So just bear with me for a couple seconds while it kicks in. There we go. We should be able to see it now. I'm going to hit start. And if you would like to play along with us today, very easy. Kahoot.it is the website that you want to head to. And then you want to put in the PIN number and ask for a PIN number. If you have Chromebooks or tablets in your classroom, you could join that way. If you do not, your teacher could pop it up at the front of the classroom. You could shout out your answers to him or her. And then, of course, if you absolutely can't get connected with technology, don't worry about it. Play along and see how you do. So maybe while we wait to see if we have a few groups come in and join us, we've got a group of students in Hamilton, Ontario. So they're at Dalewood Middle School. And they say that you mentioned that you share data with other wildlife scientists. And they want to know what would be a major factor of discovery, a major factor or discovery of excitement or concern. So,
Oh, that's a good question,
yeah,
Joe. So I think a great example of that would be learning that these animals go really close to human activity. That's exciting, but it's also a bit nerve-wracking because we want to make sure that these animals are safe in our waters. And if we know that they're crossing shipping channels and becoming close to fishing gear, we don't want them to be hit by a vessel or struck or entangled in something. But we also know that whales are really curious. So when we see, I've heard from people who work out in the middle of the ocean on big structures that whales sometimes come up to structures and have a bit of a scratch on them. Now that's really exciting, but also a bit nerve-wracking because we don't want them to hurt themselves. So hopefully that's a good example, Joe.
I think that's a great example. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, great question from our group there.
Fantastic question.
All right, let's squeeze in one more question here, and then we'll jump into the next chat. And this is one that comes up quite regularly in our events. And so, inspiration. This class would like to know what inspired you to study the ocean.
Oh, wow. I think I really love the way that whales look. So when we talk about science, you need to talk about art as well. So science, technology, engineering, art, and math. So I really am a visual person. So seeing the design of a whale, the way they're so well equipped for the ocean, their pectoral flippers, their arms are so well hydrodynamic. It's like an aeroplane, right? And that was one of the coolest things that I loved about animals. And so learning about why they look the way they look for their environment was something that I loved. But I also grew up on a farm outside of our capital here in Australia, Canberra. And I was fascinated with that movie Free Willy, which I'm sure for many of you might not even know about. But it was with the killer whale. And I was just always wanted to be a dolphin trainer. I just was fascinated at a young age. So my passion has led me to do the things that I do now. So if you're passionate about something, follow that passion. And if you're not, you don't really know what you're interested in, that's okay. That's why we go to school to work that out. And your teachers, your guardians, your parents will help support that as well. So think about the things you're really interested in and learn more, go down that direction, I would say, for those who just don't know quite yet.
All right, perfect. Well, let's play some Kahoot. Let me put this back in. There we go. Okay, looks like we got 8 groups hanging out with us. Let's get it going. And you have 20 seconds for each question. The quicker you put in the right answer, the more points you're going to get. And then we'll see who comes onto the podium at the end. So here we go. Where are the East Coast Australian whales right now? Are they in Australia, India, Antarctica, or Fiji? We have a clue decoding. I think you could probably solve it now with the clue. And then, yeah, we'll see how we do. We got a couple more seconds to lock in that answer. Where are those Australian whales right now? All right. Good job, crew there in Antarctica. Actually, not too long ago, Vanessa, you and I, at a different time, a few days apart, we're in Tasmania, and we kind of caught the tail end of that migration.
Yes. And Joe, while we say the majority are in Antarctica, there may be some in Australia, right? So it just is the bulk is down in Antarctica. And we're learning more about, are these whales sticking to the script? Sometimes they might do different things, and they could well be Joe and Fiji. I don't know, but it's not likely. So yes, well done. Antarctica is the answer.
All right. Let's go to our next question. Oh, leaderboard check-in first. The Snowing New is in first place. Let's see if they hold on. We have true or false coming your way. Humpback whales are toothed whales. Is that true? Or is that false that humpback whales are toothed whales? The quicker you get that answer in, the more points you're going to score. And we'll check out that lead. Oh, there we go. Finished before the deadline. But yeah, that is false. We learned about their baleen whales. So they have those hairs. They filter out what they like after taking those big gulps. Very, very cool. All right. Leaderboard. The blue deer sneaking into first place. Let's go to another true or false. Brutus whales are in Australia. Oh, I should have said Australian. I made it too fast. Australian waters year round. So what do you think?
I wonder if they listened, Joe.
Sorry?
I wonder if they listened.
We'll see. We'll see. So true or false, they're in Australian waters year-round. A couple more seconds. All right. Strongly went with true. And of course, we always caveat with that's what it's looking like. That's what the research is showing. Science, more research, more investigation could prove otherwise. But so far, that looks like what you're seeing. Okay. Blue Deer holding on. They're on fire. 3 correct answers in a row. Final question, and then we'll get back into some more Q&A action. Oops, I almost hit end stream. We don't want that. We want our next question. Which animals do you think come into the harbor? So do you think dolphins come in? Do you think sharks come in? Fur seals, or all of the above? So which animals do you think make their way into Sydney Harbor? Dolphins, sharks, fur seals, or all of the above? I like doing questions like this because sometimes students get a little too speedy quick and jump on their answers. Oh, no, we didn't fool many this time. All of the above is the answer picked. Dolphins, sharks, fur seals. What else, Vanessa? What else might we find in Sydney Harbor?
Penguins, little penguins, and they sound like this. They go, "Tuk, tuk." But also, Joe, right now being summertime, we have the bull sharks, which make their way down to Sydney every year. And so they hang out here for the summertime. And then when it gets too cold, they swim right back to Queensland waters.
All right. We, with our ship, when we were down there, the Oosterschelde, we went out with some students. We were putting the RV in the water. We saw some nice seagrass beds. We saw some leather jackets.
Yes.
The right term. There was big schools of them. So it was neat to use the ROV to look under the surface of Sydney Harbor.
Wow. And then that's what's so great, looking below the sea, right? All the things that are in our blue backyard, which we probably don't think about much.
Yeah. All right. Let's take a look at our podium and we'll get back into our Q&A action. Third place, we've got the Melodic Sable. In second place, the Groovy. Oh, we got a few sables hanging out backstage today. Very cool. And the Blue Deer held on for the last few questions. Very cool. All right. Come back from that screen share. Let's turn off that music and let's get right into it. So we have a group of 4th graders hanging out backstage from Georgetown. So I'm going to bring them in here. If you want to go ahead and unmute your mic for we would love to grab a few questions if you have some questions about whales. Also, if you're tuning in via YouTube, don't be shy. Let's get some more questions into the side chat bar and we will go from there. I see.
Okay. Hi.
Hey, Foray. How you doing?
Everybody say hi. Hi. Okay. So Charlotte's going to ask a question.
Can they see? How many species of whales are there?
Hello, Charlotte. That's a great question. Well, in Australian waters in particular, we see at least, there's a group, let me break this down. There's a group of whales, dolphins, and porpoises. They're called cetaceans. So that's the big umbrella of them. That's the big word that we use. In Australian waters, there is at least 45 different types. But globally, there is at least over 50. And I say that because very general with numbers, because as scientists, we are learning more about the genetics of whales, dolphins, and porpoises. So that's cetaceans. And some scientists have found in only a few years back that while we thought there was bottlenose dolphins, an inshore and an offshore one, we actually discovered that there was another species of bottlenose dolphin here in Australia. So there's now 3 subspecies. So I'm going to be very general with that answer, if that's okay, because that's also what's a great demonstration of we're learning more in the science world as well. So, but at least in Australian waters, we have around 45 different species of cetaceans, whales and dolphins. But worldwide, if you were to capture all of them, there'd be at least over 50 or so. And that's very general when it comes to that group of cetaceans, because we are learning more and there might be more out there than we think.
Yeah. Bringing up the Darwin 200 again. They've been sailing across the Pacific Ocean. So if classrooms haven't been following that, Darwin 200, weekly live classroom events from around the world as the tall ship sails basically UK to UK. It's a 2-year mission. And so they just got to the Falklands. They just finished their Pacific crossing. and have spotted some rare species like
Mhm.
the right whale porpoise, which isn't seen very
Oh,
often.
wow.
Yeah,
The
on
southern right
iNaturalist.
whale. Wow.
Yeah, I think there's only like 17 recordings on iNaturalist, which is pretty cool.
Wow.
And then because the time zones were so strange, we were doing an event, a pre-recording with them on the deck. And right before we hung up, a little group of 3 beaked whales came
Yeah.
and surfaced, swam around the ship, and then disappeared. So again, species that aren't always seen very often, but if you're out there, you might get lucky.
That's right. And beaked whales, that's why I'm so excited because I've never seen one. They're usually offshore. They look like a giant bottlenose dolphin, but they're a whale. And they live secret lives. We don't know much about them. So observations like that is just incredible and will no doubt contribute to our knowledge of these animals worldwide.
Yeah, very, very cool. Okay, Foray, if you have more questions, just shoot me a message in the chat, and that's how I'll know to come back and bring you guys in. But let's go back to YouTube. We've got 6th grade class wondering the whale snot that you're collecting. What in the world are you doing with it?
Well, we don't collect it to sniff it or eat it. Ugh, you can't do that. Don't do that. But what we do is we want to learn more about the internal health of a whale. Sometimes we see whales when we're on a boat or from the air. Sometimes we see these animals and they don't look very good. And then maybe they strand. And then when they're on the beach, well, they're not very good, unfortunately. But when you see a whale generally, most of them, thank gosh, are swimming around. They're in good body condition, which means they're nice and voluptuous. We want nice, juicy, big whales with lots of blubber, which is their fat layer, so that they're in good nick, so good health. But looking at them is one thing, understanding what's inside their lungs, and I can't do a whale necropsy here, but in their lungs, when we breathe, we have air that goes into our body. They do the same thing. They're just really big. So our lung capacity is probably about a liter or so. They can hold so much more than us. And one of the ways we can learn about the internal juiciness of their body is by collecting that below, which is that it comes directly from their nose, which their nose, unlike my nose here, has evolved and gone all the way up on top of their head. So it's like being underwater, the ultimate inbuilt snorkel where they can just look down and breathe. And we want to collect that bacteria to learn more about what's living in their lungs, to learn more about, okay, what is internal for a whale that looks relatively healthy, and then comparing those samples with whales that don't look very healthy, and then taking these samples, comparing whale snot samples with other whale populations around the world, right? So it's a whole host of information biologically that we can collect from these animals without them even knowing about it. And this is also really helpful because over time, as the ocean changes, these animals and their health may reflect changes in the ocean. So there's a whole host of things that we can collect. It looks cool, but it's for a very important purpose.
Absolutely. I can see we've got a good crew hanging out with us on YouTube as well. So don't be shy. Any questions about humpback whales or the Brutus whales that we talked a little bit about today and their surfing antics, don't be shy to put them in the chat. But 4A is saying we need to come back with them. They've got more. So I'm going to bring them back in to the stage. There we go. So go ahead, 4A. If you want to unmute, we'll take a few questions if you have a few handy.
Okay, we've got Avery.
How big is a bone-headed whale's heart, and where do they migrate?
Oh, a bowhead whale. Are you talking about a bowhead whale?
Yeah.
Okay, so I love this question. And first of all, I need to remind everyone, the majority of where you're watching is in the northern hemisphere, so the top of the world. I'm all the way down. In fact, I can see Australia and Joe's map behind his left-hand shoulder. That's where I am. You guys are, thanks, Joe. You guys are really up high. The bowhead whale is one of my favorite whales on Earth. I've never seen one. I would love to see one, but they live in the Arctic. So I'm down here and they're up there. Probably they're higher than where you are. How long are they? Look, I'm not a bowhead whale expert, but I'm going to use as much knowledge as I have. So I think a bowhead whale, I believe that they're at least 15 meters or so, maybe a bit longer or shorter. So kind of like a blue whale, but they're bigger. So for education purposes, they're the size of a bus. And bowhead whales have that really cool head where they use it as an icebreaker. So they can actually break ice. And these creatures are nice work there. See that like it's like a straight line and then a bump. These creatures live in the ice, and that my understanding is that they hang out near the icy shelf. So that middle photo there where your cursor is, that's beautiful description. So they'll hang in and around the ice. I don't understand, or I don't know rather, because I'm a scientist, I'm very open about that. I don't know about their migration movements, but what I do know is that for my PhD, I wrote a very important paper. So a PhD is like you go on to study, and then you become a doctor. My PhD was talking about how climate change is making the ocean more warm. So therefore, places in the Arctic are they're melting, which is not good. So that means that the Arctic is becoming opened to us as humans for ships and things like that, so that the bowhead whale is going to be more susceptible to our activities, and that's not very good. So in other words, we need the ice to stay really icy and not melt. So these animals are they're very associated with those icy habitats, and that's very important. So this would dictate their movements as well. So all the animals we've spoken about today are very much in tune with the world around them and what happens in the environment around them, whether it be food being here, ice being here. Their movements may be dictated by the very presence of those certain things. And that's important to keep in mind when we're trying to learn more about animals and how to protect them in the ocean.
All right. 4A, I'm going to go back to YouTube in a moment, but if you want to unmute, we'll grab another question.
Okay, Arian's next.
Why do Brutus whales stay in warm water?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I personally like the tropics, although I don't like humidity, but maybe it's the fact that because they are known worldwide as a tropical toothless whale, perhaps that these animals are equipped for an environment where they can breed when they want and they feed whenever they want. So maybe they're not very good at fasting. And I say that because humpback whales like Winston, he can go for a long time without eating, months, weeks, and that's okay because he's designed, biologically, they're designed to go for long periods of time to invest energy to breeding and then go back, refuel up, and then go invest that energy to breeding again. This species must just be equipped for a life where they're able to be reactive to where prey is. And as a result, they don't need to migrate or do anything like that. So they're more equipped for exploiting their resources or hanging out where food is and reactive to that rather than having to do a massive migration like the humpback whale. And that's really important because it goes to show that as scientists, we can't have one whole blanket that we put out to protect all whales. We need to use the information to help inform our decision making. So I hope you're seeing that as scientists, we need, in order to learn more and protect the things that we all love, information helps us do that better, right? Just like in class, if you're doing a project, researching, giving you the tools, the things to understand what you do. And your teachers do this every single day. And that makes them better teachers, right? So there's so many similarities. And whilst Joe and I are doing things in our career where we've gone past school, we still have the basics of how we go about doing things. And that's really important to learn and to know.
Okay. We'll come back 4A and see if you have a couple to wrap us up for today. But Alexis is wondering, can you remind us about how many whales are in Australian waters and maybe give us a few more examples?
Oh, yeah. So we have generally over 45 species of whales, dolphins, and porpoises. Of the whales, that would be, I would say, generally speaking, there's more than 20 species or so. And it's just because I'm not getting fixated with the amount of numbers versus toothed whales versus baleen whales. But we have humpback whales, obviously. We also have a whale called the dwarf minke whale. The dwarf minke whale is a little version of the Brutus whale. They're pretty cool. They've got a pointed mouth, and what they do is they've got this really cool sound that they make. So they travel from Antarctica to the Great Barrier Reef, and they've got this really cool Star Wars sound, right? It sounds like this. Ready? Boing. boing. Or one of the famous scientists here in Australia has described it as the Beethoven sound, the dun-dun-dun-dun, but I don't think they're making that noise. I hear the other one, but I can kind of see the similarities. And they're really cool. We also have the southern right whale, which is like your North Atlantic right whale. Their numbers aren't doing too well. We've got very low numbers, so around 400 individuals on the East Coast, which is so much better than what we have worldwide of North Atlantic right whales, which I know just aren't doing very well because ship strike and fishing gear entanglement is literally threatening their survival in the Northern Hemisphere, which is just horrific. We also have the pygmy blue whale, which, yes, there are different types of blue whale, which is incredible. They are known to go from southern Australian waters where they feed, and then they migrate up the west coast into the Banda Sea in Indonesia. That's really cool, and we're learning more about them. And then we've got other cool animals like sperm whales from time to time, and I've seen those. They're so cool. They are so cool. Sperm whales are those really, they've got the box head, and then they've got those really, the lower jaw, you can see their teeth, but they actually have teeth on the upper jaw too. We just can't see them. And they are one of the loudest whales in the ocean. They can make sound that is louder than an aeroplane taking off. So I think it's about 240 decibels, which is super, super loud. If we were near a sperm whale right now and it was making sound, you wouldn't be able to hear me talk. So that's just a little sample of the types of creatures, whales, that we have in Australian waters.
All right. I love that. I think sperm whales are so cool. We often connect with the project down in Dominica to learn about the work they're doing. And they're working to try and translate what the whales are saying with their clicks. They can see different family groups. It is so cool, the work that they're doing down there. So we always love when we get to connect and hear updates about super cool work they're doing with the whales. Okay. All right. 4A would like to come back in. So let's grab them. If you want to go ahead with a few more questions. Sounds like we have some very curious grade 4s in this classroom.
Thanks. Yeah, we've got a ton of questions, but we've got David next.
How old do whales live up to?
Oh, great question. Now, remember how we just spoke about the bowhead whale? They are really, really the champions of living a long life. Bowhead whales can live over 100 years old. In fact, there is evidence to suggest that potentially some bowhead whales are nearly 200 years old. That's amazing. The whales that I work on, predominantly the humpback whale, they probably live to around 50 to even 80 years of age. And that is amazing. Whales being long-lived tell us a lot about the environment over time. They've seen things that we haven't seen. A lot of the whales swimming there right now are older than probably all of us, right? So that's an incredible thing. And over time, whales are exposed to things in the ocean before we were born, and we can learn more about that from sampling maybe blubber, or when a whale has died, taking measurements of their baleen plates, looking at cortisol, stress hormones over the years. There is a wealth of information we can get for our whales, but it's really important that we ensure that we minimize our interaction with them through activities that might hurt them. We need to make sure we don't make the ocean too loud, because these toothless whales, like the long-lived whales, like the bowhead, the humpbacks, they need acoustic space. So they need it to be very quiet at times, because if we're too loud, they can't talk to each other. So we need to be thinking about how we maybe impact the marine world, and how you, as our next generation of scientists, can do really good for whales and us in the future, because after all, we need you to be inspired. And that's exactly why Joe set this up, and a great platform for us here in Australia right now, coming to you from the future, to be sharing this information so we can all remember that these animals are long-lived, and they see things in the environment, and they see changes in the environment, and how do the changes reflect in the way whales do what they do.
All right. 4A, go ahead. Let's squeeze in another question from your crew, and then a couple more came in via YouTube. So I'm going to grab some of those before we say goodbye for today. So go ahead, 4A, if you have another question for us.
Thanks. So Christian has a question based on a novel we're reading, which is Song for a Whale by Lynn Kelly. So Christian, go ahead.
So do you know about Blue 52?
Is that the individual whale that was calling, the one of the world's loneliest whales?
Yes.
And I was wondering why his hertz is the same as other whales.
Oh, you're very technical in your question there. I'm very impressed. So I would say, and I believe correct me if I'm wrong, is this a blue whale we're talking about?
It was so in the book it's called Blue 55. It's based on Blue 52. In the book it's, what is it, a fin whale and a blue whale were its parents?
Yes, right. So this comes down to us thinking about how we have a conversation with each other over great distances. Whales move in the ocean whenever they want, wherever they want. And as a result, they need to be equipped with sound producing capabilities that travel long distances. Be kind of like me and Joe having a conversation from Australia across the Pacific. Maybe if you're in Hawaii, Joe, we could be able to have a chat if I was a whale. So, but it also is important that the environment allows whales to talk to each other. So in response to your question, that whales, certain species will talk at a certain level. We're not going to get into the science and mechanics of all that, but being able to be heard as another whale from your species is an important thing, because it can tell you if, hey, I'm over here, there's good food here, or hello ladies, I'm a very sexy male, can you hear me because I'm singing to try and attract you over this way. Or maybe it's like, oh, I just really want to be social today, come over here. And it's important that they can hear each other. Some whale sounds overlap with each other, so they must be able to hear each other. We don't yet understand what whales can hear. Because we can actually hear humpback whales sing and other whales vocalize through underwater hydrophones, recordings, we can see it and the sounds and hear it. We must overlap in our hearing abilities, but we don't yet fully understand what whales can hear. So we're only getting snapshots of what they can hear through our recordings, which are able to determine the level at which they make sound as well. So that is a very fabulous question, and one that you should hold on to, because the world is changing. It's becoming louder in the ocean. And how are whales going to equip with this? How are they going to deal with this? I know that in windy, noisy conditions here in Australia, humpback whale males may switch to not singing and more surface-generated noises, such as a breach and peck slapping like that, and tail slapping because it makes a lot of noise. So sound in the ocean, I really want you to think about acoustics and how we can help make the ocean a quieter place so that these animals can talk to each other in the frequencies that they are able to hear each other. So that is a brilliant question. I really hope you enjoy this perspective now as you read this book.
Okay, very cool. Thanks, Foray. Those were some great questions.
Yes.
Definitely some whale enthusiasts hanging out with us there in Ontario. Awesome. Okay, a couple more before we wrap up. Miss Riddle's crew, so Nova Scotia, are wondering, they want to get into the mapping a little bit. So are you able to take social media reports to make maps of the locations where the whales are?
Oh, okay. So social media, there's two things here. Social media is fabulous for when we as scientists are not in the field or not in the ocean, because we're behind the desk doing writing, or we're talking to you kids right now. There is options where you can report sightings because you're in a different part of the world, a fabulous part. There may be places locally where you can report your whale sightings. And I would suggest one of the things that you could do is maybe look at who's doing whale research in your area and mechanisms or ways in which you can provide information of your sightings. And that's a really important thing, because here in Australia, I try and drive sightings from Sydney Harbour along the East Coast, and that's really great. But you need someone geographically closer to you who will be able to assist with that. And there will be those kind of people. This is maybe a project that you and your class can do, looking at who's doing whale research in your area and what species they're trying to investigate and why. And then any sighting that you have, you may be able to post that online, remembering that you must give animals distance. So I'm not encouraging you to go swim with whales or be close with a drone or be on a boat, you need to make sure that you give animals space. But if you're on land and you see something, snap a photo, or why not take a video and share that? And there may be scientists like me who are seeing this. And remember, obviously, anything with social media, you need to make sure that you ask an adult or a grown-up to assist you with that. So just making sure we have a little safety announcement as well. When we're looking at using social media as a great way of sharing knowledge, but also we need to be safe on social media too.
Okay, one more. Is there other mapping data tools that you use?
Look, there are. And so one of the things that we can do is try and understand vessel traffic. And vessel traffic helps us learn about where vessels are and the overlaps that they might have with where whales are. So there's a great website that you can look at very generally called Marine Traffic, and that tells you all about shipping movements. So if you're like me and you like plane movements and you want a flight track, it's like that, but in the ocean. And that can help build a picture or a map of some of the movements that ships are making in real time or near real time. One of the publications that I've put out on my website looking at global shipping movements and marine roads and their impacts on marine giants like whales, that has really cool visuals. Or even if you just Google shipping routes, and over time you can see the routes that are most, or the roads rather, that are most commonly used. And then if you have knowledge of where whales go, you can overlap this, and it can provide us with information on the overlap. And in some areas in America in particular, and Canadian waters, scientists have been able to reroute where vessels go to avoid whales at certain times of the year. So talk about science informing how we can try and minimize our interactions negatively with whales.
Yeah, very cool. Well, I want to start off, Vanessa, with a huge shout out to our classrooms. Thank you so much to the groups who joined us today. Thank you for sending in so many great questions, playing Kahoot, and of course our 4A crew who was hiding out backstage. Really awesome questions. And Vanessa, thank you for getting up early in the future and hanging out with us and talking whales and citizen science, and really just hitting that point home that anybody can be a scientist.
Yes.
And that I think we talked a little bit about kind of making mistakes and learning from them, and how that's an important part of science too. So
absolutely. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk with so many great minds right around the world. And I'm very grateful for all your time. Thank you, teachers, parents as well, for having us.
All right. Well, thanks so much, everyone. We hope to see you in some future events. We got lots coming your way. But for now, we'll say goodbye and we'll sign off. Thanks, everyone.